end with their brother. And he shows up, and Joseph sees Benjamin. And he has to go and hide himself because he was weeping. And he finally comes back, says, "Come and dine with me." And now the brothers are like, "Oh man." So right away, Judah's like, "Just so you know," tells the servant, "So just so you know, we got back to town and we found out that the money that we paid you was in it." And the servant says, "It's okay. God has blessed you. Come sit down and dine with me." So he sits down, makes a feast. Joseph gets served separate. The Egyptians that were with Joseph get served separate. And the 11 brothers get served. Benjamin gets 5 times the share. And the reason, and they had to eat separately because it would defile an Egyptian to eat with a Hebrew. It's okay. It's good to see you guys. Load them up. Give them everything they need. Send them on their way. And put their money back in their satchels. But my silver cup, put in the youngest boy's bag. So they leave. Good stuff. So they're now headed outside camp. They're outside of Egypt now. And Joseph sends his boys, says, "Go and stop them. Somebody took my cup. And whoever that is, I want him." So they go and seize the caravan headed back to Canaan. And the brothers speaking said, "Listen, we definitely didn't do this. But whoever did it, they'll be your slave. Because we're good people. We would not do this." And it just so happened in Benjamin's, the son of my right hand's bag, there just happened to be the silver cup. How can you do this to us? Are you serious, Benjamin? What? No! Seriously? Really? Wow! And then they go back. Now we're in chapter 44. Picking up in verse 14. When Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there, and they fell on the ground before him. And Joseph said to him, "What is this deed that you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I indeed can practice divination?" So Judah said, "What can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's slaves, but both we and the one whose possession was the cup has been found." But he said, "Far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the cup has been found, he shall be my slave. But as for you, go and be at peace with your father. I know you. You don't know who I am, but I know who you are. I really don't want to live with you. I don't want anything to do with you. But my brother, I want my brother back." Then Judah approached him and said, "Oh, my Lord, may your servant please speak a word in my Lord's ears. And do not be angry with your servant, for you are equal to Pharaoh." My Lord asked his servant, saying, "Have you a father or a brother?" We said to my Lord, "We have an old father and a little child of his old age. Now his brother is dead, so he alone is left of his mother, and his father loves him." Then you said to your servants, "Bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him." But we said to my Lord, "The lad cannot leave his father. And if he should leave his father would die." You said, "Unless your servants, however, unless the youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again." You said to your servants, however, "Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again." Thus it came about, we went up to your servant, my father. We told him the words of my Lord. Our father said, go back, buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down. Our father said, go back, buy us a little food. We said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons, and the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm falls upon him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. Now therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life. When he sees that the lad is not with us, he will die. Thus your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. For your servant became a ransom for the lad. To my father saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then let me bear the blame before my father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad, and a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. But how shall I go to my father? The lad is not with me, so that he will see the evil and overtake my father. So now Judah stares in his brother's face and says, let me be the ransom for your brother. The same guy that sold me into bondage. I am looking at this man. I know him. I have harbored many feelings toward this man my whole life. And now this man says, let me be the ransom for my brother. And in chapter 45, then Joseph could not control himself. Before all those who stood by him, he cried, everyone get out. So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph says to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Come closer to me. And he embraces his brothers and shows one of the greatest acts of forgiveness that has ever been shown since the foundation of the earth. In verse 7, God sent me before you to preserve you, a remnant in the earth, to keep you alive by a great deliverance.
Wow, what a story.
I'm trying to keep composed here. So, Joseph sees this in Judah and forgives his brothers and embraces them. He sends his brothers back. Pharaoh hears about it and says, wait a second, if you're going to go back, take the caravans, take wagons, get everybody. So this Pharaoh is a gracious Pharaoh. Go back, get your family, bring them the choicest fat of the land, and tell them they can come back here, and we'll set them up. We'll set them up with a palace, with a really awesome setup in Goshen. And they come back, and as a result of this, Israel, the 12 tribes, live in the land of Egypt. It's prophesied to Abraham that your descendants will be aliens in the land for 400 years. This is the start of that prophecy. So, I go back to Acts, since this is an Acts study. So Israel goes now to Egypt. And as a result of the brothers selling Joseph, and Joseph becoming a type and a shadow of the Word that brings forth plenty, preserves the life of a great nation. And they spend 400 years to the point where they become mistreated and they become true slaves. Not welcome guests, but slaves. Until Pharaoh's rose that knew nothing of Joseph. Why is this important? Why is this story that Stephen goes through important to point to Christ? Which is the lineage of Christ? Which tribe did Christ come from? Judah. Even though it was recorded through the life of Joseph, Mary's husband, his adopted father. The Christ, Messiah, Yeshua, was made able to come through Judah because of his ransom, showing that one would come through the lineage of David, through Judah, that would offer himself as a ransom for the world. This is deep stuff here. So Stephen, in his defense, says, don't you know this story? This son of David who you crucified came from this lineage because of what Judah did to ransom himself for his brother. The second brother from the woman of the promise. Any questions or comments?
Could you repeat again about the importance of this as related to Jesus? You said Jesus came, the Joseph lineage, his, not his father, not
His adopted father.
that is the Joseph we're talking about.
Yeah, interesting, it's the same name. Keep going.
I know, I'm trying to understand. So, but he came from so did Joseph come from the tribe of Judah?
Which Joseph?
Yeah, the adopted dad.
Came from the tribe of Judah.
He did come from the tribe of Judah.
And that's recorded in Matthew 1 and in Luke 3. When in Matthew 1, it talks about
right.
the lineage of Joseph, Mary's husband, as his lineage of the king. So the genealogy recorded in Matthew 1 is of Jesus, the king. Talks about all the kings up until David. And then to Abraham. And then in Luke chapter 3, it shares some of the same lineage, but brings it all the way back to Adam. So that the lineage of Judah, showing Christ as king, and then also through Judah, shows him from Adam. Fully man, fully king. Even though Joseph's seed had nothing to do with his birth. Because when Gabriel shows himself to Joseph, Joseph then says, I will accept him and I will regard him as my son. As a result of Joseph's confession, adopts Christ. Because the genealogy is never passed through the female. It's always passed through the male. It always comes from the seed. It never comes from the soul. Is that clear? It is this Judah that then became the ransom, not only for his brothers, but became the ransom for the world,
For Israel.
for Israel. Well, the first Joseph, through the first Judah, became a ransom for Israel. The second Judah, according to Melchizedek, a second priest, the second Adam, became a ransom for this world. And this Judah, the one that we worship, says, I will become a ransom. Do not go to them for their iniquity. Do not go to them for their transgression. Father, take me. So when Christ is in the upper room, he passes the cup around. Drink this, all of it. This is my blood, which is poured out for you and the everlasting covenant. Do this in remembrance of me. And when the cup comes around, he says, but I cannot drink this cup with you until I drink it anew with you in the kingdom. Earlier on, he says, the cup that I go to drink, you cannot drink. Hours later, after this experience, we see him in the garden sweating blood. It was so painful that angels had to help him drink the cup. And he cries out, Father, let this cup pass from me. But nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. What cup was he drinking that we could not drink? What cup were we drinking in the upper room that he could not drink? There was an exchange happening. There was a transaction happening. By faith, he was putting his perfect sinlessness, his spirit, into us. And by faith, we were drinking him and receiving his perfect, undefiled, incorruptible seed into us. And then hours later, he was exchanging. There was an exchange happening where he was then drinking us in. And he who knew no sin became the ransom. He became sin, who knew none of it, so that we would become his righteousness. This is the story that Joseph was inherently telling before he was stoned to death. He tells the story of Abraham.
Stephen.
What did I say?
We know what you meant.
So Stephen is telling the story about Abram to Abraham, Sarai to Sarah, Ishmael and Isaac, Esau and Jacob, Judah and Joseph. He's telling this story that there was a pattern. God has been telling the story of redemption, that there would be a son born that would redeem the world. Here he is. What don't you understand? And why don't you share, we were talking in the hallway earlier, why don't you share with the brethren why was Joseph, because the way you explained it was beautiful. I'd love for you to share it with the group. Do you remember? About teaching to what they knew?
Oh, about what Stephen?
Yeah. Why would Stephen do this?
Well, it made sense to me that the way Stephen is teaching in Acts was a good teacher. He wasn't taking them outside what they understood. He's teaching from something they thought they understood fully and they were fully connected with. He's using everything that the teachers of the law would know and understood as an example of something that they didn't understand. And say, okay, if you fully embrace this, then look what it's teaching us. Look what it's really saying.
Because all these people that were standing there renting their garments before they killed him, they have these stories rehearsed. They have these stories memorized. Memorized. They had to. And he goes and starts telling this story. And I can see, I can feel, like, what don't you understand? This story has been told through our forefathers the whole time. What don't you get? And it's so beautiful.
I think they did choice. Do you think? Don't you think they understood exactly what he was saying and they rejected? They rejected it? How could they miss it?
He who has ears to hear, let him hear. If our hearts are hardened, like Pharaoh, how could we ever hear the voice of our Father? We can't.
I mean, it parallels a lot what's going on today when we try and share Christ. I mean, we've got-
This is my 4th week teaching, so don't get ahead of myself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. History certainly repeats itself. Here we are today. Again, I love when I teach, I kind of always feel at the end, it's like I don't have a plan, but I always get like this nudge. How does this apply to us? What's the point? Okay, it's a great story about Christ, the fulfillment of Christ. That's awesome, really cool. Now I can stand up and I can defend the prophecy of the Christ to come and the Christ that came and the fulfillment of that prophecy. Awesome. What does that have to do with me? What does it have to do with you? What's the point? A lot, right? There's a lot of a point here. Because today, Moses is still taught. Whether they realize it or not, Moses is still taught till this day. The law is still taught to this day. And since you bring it up, let's go through it, because we still have a few minutes here. How is this so? Stephen uses the early church history to defend Christ. So could we. Not only, we have another story to tell that Stephen didn't. We can still use the early church story of Genesis and Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Numbers and Chronicles. We can still use that same story to talk about where the wheels fell off the bus and why they did not believe that Christ was the Christ. And Christ fulfilled what all these people said that he was going to fulfill. Because they were looking for an earthly king. They were looking for someone that was going to restore peace to the land. And the scripture says that he was going to do it. Well, did he do it? No, look at this. There's still wars. Look at Caesar. And look at all these things. And look at Iran. And look at Canada. And look, the same, we're still looking for this earthly manifestation of a king that came and finished the work. He wouldn't have said it's fulfilled if it wasn't. So where was it fulfilled? In you. It was fulfilled in you. But there are still those today that say, no, he didn't do it. Didn't finish it. Because if he finished it, then I still wouldn't be living in this diseased sin state. So we get brought before councils. I know I am. How dare you say that you are sinless? How dare you say that you're holy and righteous? Look at me. I live this way. I know if I can live this way and I'm trapped in this state, so are you. How dare you say that the Christ came and fulfilled it? Well, he said it. He's been telling the story the whole time. So how does this apply to us here today? Well, let's look at our history. AD. The AD history of where the trains fell off the tracks. We've been studying where the trains have been falling off the tracks for the Israelites the whole time, because he's standing before people that have known these stories, and he's rehearsing these stories, and they still killed him. Clearly they didn't get it. So as far as our church history, where did the trains fall off the tracks? And you should know these things. They're important for you to know how we got to this point. Because the message that you get to hear, the message that you read in this Bible, is the truth. But there's a reason why we're just yet a small band of people. And there is millions of others that believe that we're wrong. This is supposed to be, this message of righteousness, is the normal message. This is normalcy. Even though the quote-unquote normal is what is outside. So the early church, they were called Christians. It was a negative slur. Why? Because they would walk around saying, I'm just like Christ. I have the same identity, power as Christ. It's no longer I who live, don't you know? I was crucified with him. He drank me in. I was with him on that cross. My lineage now on the other side of the cross, on the other side of the Jordan, is no longer tied to mommy and daddy Ezel. My lineage is now tied to my Father in heaven. I no longer am attached to this sinful creature, this seed of Adam. I'm no longer attached to that because that man died in Christ. So they were called Christians. How dare they? And then our forefathers, and I'm talking about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. I'm talking about Paul and Peter and Thomas. Our forefathers of this church, of this age, had died. They were dead and buried, martyred, stoned, ripped in pieces. And then Satan, very crafty fellow, says he really didn't finish it. Come, eat of this tree and you'll be just like God. Come on, come and do it. So we did. Then through Josephus, and then a guy comes on the scene named Augustine, a philosopher of great. And he was about to be killed by Rome. Augustine had these really awesome philosophies. He wanted to be the next Plato or the next Aristotle. And they were seeking to kill him because at this point, Constantine says the religion of the world now is Christianity. I've had an experience with Jesus. So if you're not a Christian, we're going to kill you. So they go after Augustine and they finally catch up and he goes, wait a second, I've had revelations from God. I've been converted. I'm a Christian. Okay. And Augustine is one of the founding fathers, the patriarch of the Roman Catholic movement. And builds these doctrines of original sin. The Council of Nicaea, the ecumenical councils come up, they form all these dogmas and all these doctrines. The Immaculate Conception, Mary's without sin. Original sin, you must be christened or baptized in order to get rid of this original sin, and if you don't, you go to purgatory. So only the priests, only the bishops were allowed to baptize. They got really busy because the kingdom was really expanding. They were taking over many lands. So they couldn't keep up with the baptisms. So they came up with this doctrine of confirmation. So I'll come back a couple of times a year. You can pay me a second time. The priest now can do the baptizing. I'm going to come back and confirm the baptism. Blah, 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 blah. So all these things were happening, right? And then towards the tail end of all these foundational sacramental dogmas, they came up with this thing of selling of indulgences. So in order for you to be saved, you had to buy it. Cash. Geesh, the goods. You had to buy it. I'm going to give you a piece of paper here. At this point, a really cool guy named Guggenheim comes on the scene and invents the printing press. So they have these templates, right? These Microsoft Word documents that they would pump out. Just fill in your name, fill in the blanks, pay your dues, and now you're good. My son was killed in a farming accident. We didn't have a chance to get him confirmed. No problem. Here's your sign, here's your bill. The priest will go back, the bishops will go back. We got it covered. We'll take care of it for you. We're holy men. We got this thing covered. And now it turns into this really elaborate business. The founding of the Vatican Bank. I realized one day, because I'm going to put this on YouTube, this will be brought forward on my last day. I'm cool with that. So, I even said that on camera. Anyway, so we're going to buy these, we're going to sell these indulgences, and people are buying them, and it's all good. Until this radical guy who's in seminary in Germany says, no, enough. That guy was named Martin Luther. So Luther comes on the scene.